Hello and welcome to the CoffeeMTG channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at the top 5 green cards for the new Magic the Gathering set Phyrexia All Will be One. I'm sure you're going to notice that my top 5 picks are actually 6, because I couldn't filter down the cards that I've chosen for green. There's some very powerful and very situational, though I think there's significant utility in those situational cards that makes them viable in any case. So let's jump straight into it, and the first card that I'll be talking about is Bloated Contaminator. It is a 2 colorless 1 green creature Phyrexian beast, 4/4 trample toxic 1, and whenever the Bloated Contaminator deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. This is just so much value. It's a 3-drop for a 4/4. Just that alone is good value. It's now got trample, which is better. It's got toxic 1, so it's better again. Unless an opponent is going to block the full 4 toughness of that, full power of that creature, they'll be taking both toxic and generic damage. And then whenever it deals that generic damage to a player, you're going to get to proliferate across the board. Particularly in green, where you're going to be seeing a lot of different counters. And if you're splashing this into other colors, this is so much value from a 3-drop. I love it. This is an excellent card, and no doubt it's going to see a lot of play. Competitive play for sure. Moving on, now this was probably the closest card I could consider cutting because it's the most situational, but let me explain why I still included Green Sun's Twilight. It is 1 generic green and X color. Reveal the top X+1 cards of your library. Choose a creature card and or a land card from among them. Put those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is 5 or more, instead put the chosen cards onto the battlefield or into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Now, I think this card is now, firstly, if it was an instant, obviously it would be even better, but even at sorcery, it's got enough utility that, in my view, makes it valuable for pretty much any green deck. The reason for this is, at the early stage, if you're really struggling, it's going to give you a light tutor effect to go and grab probably, let's say, guaranteed 1 land and or, you don't have to be going heavy on creatures, but you're definitely going to hit at least 1 land if you desperately need it. So it will help you secure your mana base in that mid game. But as you transition to the late game and it sort of starts dragging on, and for at least for me, my games tend to go. In fact, I would say that my games even, maybe 10 or 15% of my games, my opponents end up decking themselves. But when we're talking about green, one of the key abilities has always been getting some threats onto the board and overwhelming your opponent. The start strategies usually included tooth and nail, ultimatum decks. You could even consider unnatural growth from one of the more recent sets as an ability to overwhelm, usually with hasty creatures. And there's another one that has recently come out in this set, which we'll talk about a bit later. But basically, I think this is giving you a good opportunity to find 1 or 2 threats at the top of your library, get them onto the board, and effectively reset the state in a way that gives you threat potential, particularly if you've got ETB effects or you've got creatures that are difficult to hit or have instant value. Perhaps they have haste, or they have haste and toxic, just something that gives you that surprise potency that might edge out and win the game for you. So I think Green Sun's Twilight, while on the surface it's not particularly overwhelming, I think it just gives you that utility that is going to be effective in a drawn out game that makes it worthwhile to have in the deck. Keep in mind though, it does not target planeswalkers, which is somewhat disappointing, as the next card we're talking about here is Nissa, Ascended Animist, a very cheap planeswalker to cast at 7 mana, 3 colorless, 2 green, and another 2 green or 4 life, depending how you want to pay this one. That is the completed mana cost. Legendary Planeswalker, 7 loyalty. Now, this first ability is both a blessing and a curse. +1, create a XX green Phyrexian horror creature token, where X is the loyalty. On the one hand, it's got a high starting loyalty, and on the, I guess supporting, you could be comboing this off with some blue or white, allowing you to have duplicate copies of the token. You could get 2 or 3 out onto the board, which would be a lot of fun. But the risk here is if someone has removal for your Planeswalker, it effectively nullifies those tokens immediately. So it feels a little bit situational in that essence. You do get a -1 loyalty ability to destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's good. It's a little bit more situational, but it's good. It's not great, just good. And then the -7 ability is until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 for each forest you control and gain trample. Obviously that is the game ending ability. So if you had the ability to proliferate on the board during the turn that you played this, and then you actually, I mean, you could play this straight up and just go -7 immediately and give everything +1/+1 for each forest and trample. That is really the win con for this deck, and I think really what the designer of this card might have been targeting is for people to accept they're going to be paying full life. Drop this for 5. Oh, actually no, you can't, because the complete cost discounts the loyalty counter, so you will have to hardcast this at 7 if you want to have those immediate 7 counters to activate that final Planeswalker ability at -7. Fortunately, we are in the green color, so there's plenty of ramp. If you wanted to splice over to red, you might get some accelerant out of treasure tokens. So you could get this out a little bit quicker. Yeah, I'm not... look, this card is fantastic. It's going to find a home in some sort of a shell. I think the real measure of the success of this card is going to be how quickly it activates lethality for a deck. I don't see the first ability or the second ability being the reason I want this card. They're nice abilities. They're, in my view, weak utility. So really, it's that last ability that I'm wanting to get maximum value out of. And let's see how the meta develops, and if that does turn out to be a really cool, fun game-ending mechanic, or if it's, you know, just way overpriced for what it is, which it very well could be. Yeah, if this Planeswalker had the ability to come in at completed on 5 mana, and instead of -7 loyalty, there was an option to go -5 loyalty, and you know, it would say for every 2 forests you control, you get +1/+1 and trample. Something that gave you that little bit of flexibility in its playstyle would have been nice, but that's fine. We're going to find out how this card operates soon enough, but it's definitely worth 1 or 2 off just for an experimentation. Now the 4th card in the lineup is Thrun, Breaker of Silence. It's a 5 mana drop, 2 green, 3 colorless legendary creature troll shaman 5/5. And let's take a minute to appreciate that is some awesome card art. I'm not sure if anyone, probably a few of you are coming over from the Games Workshop Warhammer era. That's a little bit reminiscent of one of the Lizardman old ones. Very, very cool. The fact that this spell can't be countered is great, because at 5 mana, I don't want it to be. If I'm hardcasting at 5 mana, I appreciate the fact that it can't be countered. It comes into play with trample, and this ability is a little bit confusing. Thrun, Breaker of Silence can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control, or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. I think this is going to trip some people up, but basically it means a spell has to be green for it to be targetable on the Breaker of Silence. That's all. So it's basically got color protection from all the other colors, and as long as it's your turn, it also has indestructible. So it's clearly designed to be a beatdown card. Be aggressive with it. Abuse the fact it has trample, abuse the fact it has indestructible, and abuse the fact that it can't be targeted by anything other than green, which, let's face it, there's almost no removal in green that's going to deal with this. So it's basically a card that you're going to be throwing into your opponent, and they're not going to be able to do much about it. So I think this is fantastic. It does lack haste, But that's okay, because the next card we're talking about, Tyrranax Rex, is a 7-drop Phyrexian dinosaur creature at 8/8. It also cannot be countered. It has Trample, Ward 4, Haste, and Toxic 4. This is a nightmarish card, and I love this. I will absolutely be playing this card. I'll be playing this card in any type of deck that has splashed green, or indeed any type of deck that has a way of getting this onto the board, perhaps in a reanimate meta. The fact that the spell can't be countered does give the decks that want to play a more traditional ramping playstyle a little bit of confidence that they're not going to completely whiff their turn and feel absolutely robbed when a single counterspell takes out their 7 mana drop. The fact it has haste means there is a whopping threat on the table against what is likely to be its most significant opponent, which is going to be blue and white because of the removal. Black is obviously also a consideration when it comes to removal, but this card also has Ward 4, so it's going to deal with anything that is targeted, and the trample ability pretty much guarantees the toxic element of this is going to be going through. I can't see too many people being able to block the entire 8 damage. I have no idea what shell I'm going to put this in. It fits in everything. You could put this with a deck that's so a prison deck, a white deck going in board wipes. You can do it in black sacrifice, reanimate. You do it in red with accelerant from treasure tokens. You obviously do it in mono green. You're going traditional accelerant. There could even be some ways to do this with blue and get some copies of it out. Equipment, you do double strike. There's just so much that this card is doing for you when it's on the board. This is, again, not a 4-of, given it costs 7, but it's a 2 or a 3 for sure, in my opinion. And it doesn't particularly matter if it's in your hand or if you draw it half the time or not. It's just going to be one of those cards where when you have it in your hand, it's just got so much value. You don't want to have 2 or 3 of them sitting in your hand, because it's sort of a waste at that point. So this is a 2-of, definitely. Very cool card. And the 6th card in my top 5 is Zopandrel Hunger Dominus, a 7-drop, 2 green, 5 colorless, another legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror, at 4/6 with reach, so it can block flying. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until the end of turn. This is effectively another version of Unnatural Growth, which was an enchantment card that came out, I believe it was in Midnight Hunt, and that card was a lot of fun. I ended a lot of games with that. There was a frog that had haste, a 4/4 frog, but that was a brutal card as well. Gave you some life gain and some +1/+1 counters. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was very cool. And anyway, this is effectively the ability of Unnatural Growth printed on a creature card. And it does have a second ability where tap 2 or pay 4 life, sacrifice 2 other creatures, put an indestructible counter on this creature. It's a nice to have, not particularly good value, but nice to have. And do I see this as seeing a lot of play? Honestly, I do not. I see this maybe as a 1 or a 2-of in some decks that are either finding ways to abuse creatures coming onto the board quickly, with tokens and go wide strategy, or a kind of deck that is more traditional around the Tooth of Nail ultimatum style, where you're going to be able to drop 1 or 2 threats quickly onto the board, or 3, and this ability would then effectively trigger a win condition for you. So that basically wraps up the top 5 picks of green using 6 green cards. Thanks very much for sticking around. Please feel free to share any feedbacks, leave comments, and give me a like if you enjoyed this video and would like more content. Have a great day. Thank you very much.